Thank you. Good morning, everybody. I want to call to order the Finance and Administration Committee of the County of Renfrew on Thursday, February 16th. It is in fact 9:30 a.m. As we gather this morning, I would like to acknowledge on behalf of Council and our community that we are meeting on the traditional territory of the Algonquin people. We would like to thank the Algonquin people and express our respect and support for their rich history, and we are extremely grateful for their many and continued displays of friendship. We also thank all the generations of people who have taken care of this land for thousands of years. Ms. Wilson, has roll call been taken?
Through you, Chair, yes, roll call has been taken.
Thank you. Is there any disclosure of pecuniary interest or the general nature thereof? I see none. Can I get a mover and seconder for the minutes of the previous meeting held on January 11th? Moved by the member from Killaloe, Hegarty and Richards, seconded by the member from North Algona, Wilberforce. Any errors or omissions? All in favor? Thank you. At this time, I need a mover and seconder to amend the agenda to include the admin report number 3 that was emailed to you, and the other addendum number 4 that's on your desks. Moved by the member from Laurentian Hills, seconded by the member from North Algona, Wilberforce. All in favor? Thank you. All right, and we have no delegations at this time, so I will turn this over to Mr. Kelly for his administration report.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning once again to committee. Item number 1 is a note that we have aired and are trying to fix that by letting you know this. The weighted voting system, we went back to the bylaw. There are several questions that were asked of the weighted voting system after 2 recorded votes were done in the last council meeting. We went back to our bylaw and in fact had miscalculated. The actual weighted voting system was based on a bylaw going back to 2001 and clearly states how the votes are broken out in terms of 1 to 500, 501 to the next notch, as you'll see forward. So that has been recalculated, as you'll see in the appendix on page number page number 6 of your agenda. It did not change the outcome of those 2 recorded votes. It changed the numeric outcome, but the resolution of the yeas versus the nays were actually the same. Ultimately, the decision was the same. So that is there for your information, and we do apologize for this mistake, and we have updated that in the orientation packages moving forward. Item number 3 is now in your addendum, as the chair noted, is a piece of information that we've received from the Federal Electoral Boundaries Commission. And this was as a result of several consultation meetings that have been held over the last few months. You'll remember the warden was directed to send a letter in support of the position from the Township of Greater Madawaska. The Commission has now ruled, if you will, on the new Commission or the new federal electoral boundaries. The one for our area has not changed, at least the boundary has not changed, but the name has changed, and the name is now Algonquin, Renfrew, Pembroke, to better represent this territory. My assumption is that the federal member of parliament is responsible for the area of South Algonquin, but not all for the district of Nipissing, so they've removed that word Nipissing, and again to recognize our close association with the Algonquin people. That piece is for your information. And item number 4 is a resolution. I can talk to that, Chair, if you want, or do you want to go through the items of information?
Can we just do information first?
Sure, absolutely.
Excellent, thank you. Okay, so information item number 1, the weighted voting. Seeing none. Number 3, the electoral boundaries. All right. Yes, so you want to do 4 and then 3?
That would be fine, Chair, please.
Can you read the recommendation, please?
Yeah, we'll get the recommendation on the floor. That the Finance and Administration Committee recommend that the March meeting of this committee be rescheduled to Monday, March 20, 2023.
Thank you. Can I get a mover and seconder to get it on the floor, please? Moved by the member from Laurentian Hills, seconded by the member from Admiston Bromley. Discussion.
I can provide some background if you'd like, Chair, before we go to discussion. If you'd
sure,
like.
go
Okay.
ahead.
It's just, well, this background's pretty much in writing. The warden and I are tasked with doing strategic planning, a strategic planning exercise for the Warden's Caucus in Napanee on those 2 days, which would disallow us with a scheduling conflict to dial in by Zoom, and we are requesting of this committee to move the date to the 20th. Thank you.
Thank you. The councillor from Killu, Hegarty and Richards, please.
I definitely have a conflict that day, as our budget review is a full-day meeting in Killu that day.
Thank you. Does anybody else have a scheduling issue? The member from Admiston Bromley, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I do not have a scheduling issue. I'm just kind of curious, so I understand what is the impetus for moving the Finance and Administration, but I noted the Health Committee seems like it's been advanced in March. It's only going to be, in fact, a week after the ostensibly the February Council meeting that's being held on the 1st of March. That I think that's been advanced a week. I think typically that would have been, rather than the 8th, that would have been the 15th. I'm curious what was the impetus for, I think, advancing the entire committee week outside of FNA.
Thank you. Mr. Kelly, please.
Thank you, Chair, and to the member. The reality is it's March break the following week for the school boards in the local area, and that was part of the schedule that was sent out at the beginning of your term with that calendar in there. So we moved it away from March break so those with children or grandchildren could attend March break holidays.
Thank you. Anything further? Then I will call for the vote. All in favor? And we will miss you, member from Killaloe, Hegarty and Richards, but thank you for letting me know in advance. All right, and we'll go back to number 2. Would you like to read the recommendation, please? Mr. Kelly.
Thank you, Chair. The recommendation is the Finance and Administration Committee recommend that County Council receive the county's draft strategic plan for 2023 to 2026, and that staff bring back the full report to the budget workshop and to the March meeting of County Council.
Thank you. Can I get a mover and seconder to get it on the floor, please? Moved by the councillor from North Elgin Wilberforce, seconded by the member from Laurentian Hills. Mr. Kelly.
Thank you, Chair. And I'm just, if you will allow me 13 seconds here, I'm just going to share my screen. Right. Thank you, Chair. I'll do it from here just because it's easier with technology. So I want to first off thank County Council and staff, managers for their engagement through the few sessions we had in January. We had, as you recall, a very good session with Mr. Lockhart where we worked through and developed a series of recommendations working towards new goals and objectives. The second day, your senior leadership and their managers sat together to go through what you had parsed out to be your 10,000-foot level goals and how we would work forward on an action plan. And of course, the entirety of this report is in your package. There will be, and this will be circulated in the weeks to come, and especially for the March meeting, Mr. Lockhart's full piece of information with all the background information, including the survey results that we had during the facilitation. However, for your purposes and for the public's purposes, the mission and vision statements have been realigned with some simple wording changes. The mission statement did remain the same, albeit that we added the last line, if you will, for the following 6 priorities. So we just wanted to bring that out a little bit more, make that a little more focused based on your feedback. The vision we've drafted as a 10-year vision for this council moving forward, so we have some longer-term planning beyond this term of council. And of course, you'll see these 6 identifying parts of that vision and emphasis on advocating, embracing, managing, identifying, progressing, and working with. So we kept a lot of what you wanted. We kept a lot of the technology piece in there. We kept the economic development piece and some of the main pieces about working with local municipalities on key priorities. I'm I'm going to flip down to our shared goals and objectives. So by the end of 2026, this is what you had left us with, was 6 key objectives: financial sustainability, workforce development, community wellness and healthcare, shared services and resources, attainable housing and infrastructure, and environmental resiliency. And amongst those was key deliverables that you would hope that we would deliver by the end of your term of council. So again, as I mentioned, we went through each goal to determine how we could work with our staff and what was reasonable and what could fit within our budget and our capacity, quite honestly, moving forward. So working through these documents, and I won't necessarily go into detail on each one of them because I know it is in draft format and for your comments, and you have received this. But on the top level, you'll see that the objectives are there for each one, and the timing to achieve these objectives over here. So you'll note the actions are based on staff's feelings of capacity or work plans that they may already have in the pipeline to move forward over the next few years. So again, financial sustainability, goal number workforce development, and some key deliverables that have actually helped us form this year's budget. And of course, Mr. Foss will address that in today's F&A budget on how we'll work through some of these strategies that staff have aligned with their work plans. Goal number 3, community wellness and healthcare. Goal number 4, shared services and resources. Goal number 5, attainable housing and infrastructure. And of course, goal number 6, environmental resiliency, that talks about the climate plan, talks about some of the GIS works and some other advocacy through active transportation. So again, based on some comments I've heard from committee already, this is in your package. I wanted to high level it at this point, but knowing that you've reviewed that, I'm happy to have a discussion and talk about it here today. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I'll open it up to comments, questions, discussion. The member from Admiston Bromley, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you through you to Mr. Kelly, and thank you to all of staff. Certainly, I thought that was an enormously productive day facilitated by Mr. Lockhart, but I understand, of course, that there was significant follow-up by staff, maybe a full day session following up that put a little bit more meat on the bones of what we had discussed. Just a couple of things. So I'm assuming that this may be coming forward for some discussion. That flesh that's been added was outside of the forum that involved council. There's a couple of questions. One on financial sustainability, goal number 1. That's on page 16 of the report. And it's the 6th bullet point, the long-term financial plan and AMP. The first question that I have, because the champions of this are corporate services and CAO clerk, is does the asset management plan, is that housed now within corporate services? I think that was within D&P at one time, recognizing, of course, that there are assets spread across the entire corporate entity, but I think it was the aegis for the AMP was within D&P. Is that now changed?
Mr. Kelly.
Thank you, Chair, and to Councillor Donahue. Yes, if you were on the last council, you may recall there was a business case being brought forward for some realignment of staff in D&P, and one of them was the removal of the asset management coordinator role, who was largely responsible for inputting changes to our AMP over the term. With a rejuvenated effort to closer match it to our financial plan, the duties have been moved to essentially the finance manager and the staff in finance.
Thank you. Supplementary, Councillor Donahue.
Thank you, Madam. From Admiston Bromley. Correspondence.
I'm just getting used to it.
Thank you for the clarification, Mr. Kelly. So, on to my comments. I don't know what annually is suggesting of timing, because when we were discussing this, or when I was bringing this forward at the all-day session involving council, it was to have a substantive review. Both of these documents, the AMP predates the financial plan. I think that the asset management plan might have been created in the 2010 to 2014 period, and then that was followed up with the financial plan, which was intended to address the needs presented through the AMP. Where I was going with this, what I anticipated with this, was not just an annual review and scorecard, it was with specific sessions that are going to address the assumptions. So I know that one of the assumptions that went into the long-term financial plan, at least the initial stage, was a much lower levy target. That was amended in April of 2015. But I also know that the long-term financial plan identified several items as assumptions to move forward. I believe that those have substantively changed. We discussed that, I think, at perhaps the development of the 2022 budget, not least of which, when we see the scorecard at Budget Workshop next week, we're going to see the expectation of receiving $500,000 from the provincial government. Well, the ISIP or OSIF funding alone, I think, is now $2.6 million, setting aside any of the other streams, whether it be through RED, et cetera. So I think that that's become stale dated, and I think that that is what I was conceiving when we had our session in the downstairs with Mr. Lockhart. And the other one was with respect to the AMP. I know that Mr. Perkins and his department have been working diligently. I know there have been some once again, it was with assumptions that were done at that time. There are some roads that we encountered in previous years that had a rural profile and should in fact have had an urban profile. These are things that I think need to be updated, and I know at the committee that you had, that operations had here on Tuesday, there was also the discussion with respect to widening even the rural roadways from a 7.5 meter to a larger one. Certainly, I think that there was a validity to the discussion that ensued then, but I think that that would be a discussion that should involve council more broadly. And with both of those documents, I think that I'm assuming that they kind of followed up on PSAB and were driven by that requirement appropriately. But I think that there was some urgency in the development of both of those, that a lot of assumptions had to be made, and we've now had 8 to 10 years of actual practical real-world experience. And that's what I was conceiving of when I'm talking about a review. Not that at the end of the year we spend 20 minutes at budget determining if that's accurate or that's accurate, but we re-engage in I'm sure, a much more abridged version of what was done in that 2010 to 2014 with respect to these critical documents. And I'm not sure that that's captured in annual.
Thank you, Chair, and to you again, Councillor Donahue. So the intent, and we can put some time in, again, this is a great discussion. I would suggest to you, as noted, that we would be bringing a report card forward every year on how we're doing, an update. If you recall, I think it was Mr. Boland and myself several years ago had brought council up to speed on the progress made on the asset management plan. Here's where we are. I don't know that we've done that in the last, my gosh, you've been here 3 years, 4. We haven't actually done that 4 years. We haven't done that in about 5 or 6 years, and it would behoove us to do that, I would agree. In conversations with Mr. Foss, it does fit within that budget timeline, so perhaps in January or in December, as it fits. What is the progress made over the course of capital works in that year? What have we spent and how have we done to update our asset management plan? Feeding into the long-term financial plan. You'll see today, well actually next week, I guess, the LTFP, Mr. Foss will be going through that with Mr. Burke to say, here's where we're at in the State of the Union. But we can have that discussion in January to bring us up to speed, if you will, and before we launch into the budget process, to give you context before we get to the whole discussion of the budget.
The member from Evanston Bromley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. That is, in fact, what I had anticipated in this, which is not consistent with what I had conceived at the session, the engagement with Mr. Lockhart. And what I would cite as one of the illustrations is certainly we can measure how we're doing against our asset management plan. What I don't know is our asset management plan proving to be accurate? We have found that I think the culverts we determined were in a poorer state of repair than had been anticipated at the time. I don't know if the level of service that was decided upon when the development of the asset management plan is still sufficient. I know I think it was last year when we went through the budget, I had some questions because it looked like we were perhaps diminishing the level of service that we were anticipating for bridges. And in not being able to follow how those things are being done, the scorecard doesn't provide me the basis to make that decision. We could be doing really well on an insufficient plan. That's what I'm getting at here. These things have been in existence for 10 years now, and a whole lot of the assumptions that went into their creation, I'm not sure have been consistent with the real-world application, and that's where I'm looking at having these almost not, I would not suggest necessarily at a strategic planning all-day session level of thing, but that over the course of 2023 or 2024, if need be, that we have very focused sessions on a complete review of these, such as, do these remain accurate in terms of our real-world expectation? Is the work that we're putting into our roadways, are we seeing deterioration faster than we had anticipated we would see deterioration? These are things that we aren't doing when we look at a report card. So that's ultimately to this committee what I'm suggesting that needs to be. And in terms of the strategic plan itself, which was the jumping off point, that's where I'm concerned with that annually and what that means on page 16.
Thank you for that. I think the brains of the operation here have an answer for you.
Thank you, Chair, and through you, good morning, Finance Committee. Just having a brief conversation with our CAO. Asset management planning for all municipalities in Ontario is a regulated practice. So Ontario Regulation 588-17 lays out the practical guidelines for municipalities to follow as far as asset management goes. When we get to the budget workshop next week, I will review our progress in meeting all of the milestones to date. There was a significant milestone that took place on July the 1st of 2022. Happy to say that we've met that milestone, but the next significant milestone in our asset management journey occurs July the 1st of 2024. And you know, in a nutshell, and not stealing my own thunder for next week's session, but to date, all Ontario municipalities must have developed an asset management plan in accordance with the regulations for core infrastructure assets. So water and wastewater, stormwater, but for us, the big ones are roads, bridges, and culverts. And so we have met those requirements within that regulation, but by July of 2024, every asset in Schedule 51 of our financial report, so everything that qualifies to be a fixed asset, must also follow OREG 588-17, and we must have clearly defined condition ratings or standards for all of our assets, along with a 10-year plan to rehabilitate, refurbish, or replace those assets. And so we are on a journey like yourselves, your local municipalities, and so we are putting plans in place at the staff level to ensure that we continue to meet those standards and those guidelines. So asset management will be a high-profile issue for us in 2023, culminating in a presentation to committee to ensure that not just our existing core infrastructure assets are in compliance, but all of our assets are in compliance with the regulations for asset management planning. So to Councillor Donohue's question about the strategic plan and, you know, a review or an update of asset management as far as the strategic plan goes, it fits very nicely with what we are planning to do and what we're required to do from the perspective of provincial regulations. So I hope that addresses the the issue or the comment. It certainly will be at the staff level, lots of work taking place in 23, and probably then preparing for presentations for the impact of that in budget 2024, early in 2024, and then ensuring that we meet all of those regulation deadlines by July of 2024. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Supplementary, the member from Edmundston Bromley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It actually, I appreciate certainly the answer, and I appreciate that this is driven by regulation, by statute, and ultimately by regulation, but it's not addressing what I'm speaking to directly. I get that we are required to do this, and I get that we're required certainly for OSIF funding. It's a significant component of that. What I'm getting at, though, is the province didn't tell us what our level of service should be. We decided what our level of service should be. Is it appropriate? Can we change it? It will have financial impacts. Do we wish to change it? I know at the Operations Committee on Tuesday, there was a discussion of changing even our rural roads from 7.5 meters to 8.5, 9, 10. That's going to have a financial impact. Has there been any discussion of that? I don't think the province has said we must have 10-meter wide roads. I know that the discussion that ensued at operations was, so there certainly is a component that is consistent with active transportation, and there may be funding opportunities, et cetera. There was also a discussion that, in fact, the degradation that we see on asphalt surfaces begins at the edges. So this would also buy us some time and might extend. But I'd be interested in knowing, where is that break even? Is there a break even? Is it going to cost us more now with that? Those are questions that I believe Council should have input in, that the province is not handing down by regulation. We're deciding, and I'm pretty sure, at least from my perspective, that at budget time is not to have those discussions, just like we even set the targets for our budget in September of the previous year. That doing that while we are engaged in giving consideration to our budget, I think is going to distract from the budget. I think we should be setting those foundational standards. Once again, that's where I'm talking about a report card on how we're doing when we are proposing to make substantive changes to to both the AMP. Changes aren't being proposed right now to the financial plan, though I would like to. But I think that these need to be done at focused sessions. That's what I'm talking about. Now, we're talking about the strategic plan right now. That's why I'm raising it here. I would have liked to have seen that to have a much more focused discussion, at least something other than annually. The discussion on how we're going to do it outside of the strategic plan, I'm certainly open for a discussion on that, but I am certainly not satisfied with just at budget time having a conversation on what this year is going to be.
Okay, thank you for that. Can we leave? Oh, sorry, go ahead, Mr. Kelly.
No, thank you, Chair, and I'll just try to. I appreciate this feedback. This is really helpful. What I'm suggesting, and I think it's very achievable, and you said it as I was writing this, is when we set our targets, typically September, October, when we set our targets, I think you're absolutely correct that it would be wise of us to have these sessions this fall, to bring this updated or talk about these sessions prior to getting budget direction. And we will, I'll make some amendments, obviously this is draft format, to discuss this as a 2023-24 item, and then to be reviewed annually. And I appreciate the feedback on this, if that satisfies your request.
Excellent. Yes, member from Edmundston Bromley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It absolutely does. Just the only other point that I wanted to raise, and and it's not on this topic, it's on another one, with the community wellness and healthcare, would very much like to have included a bullet point in addition to the 4 presented of the county's engagement in the Ottawa Valley, Ontario Health Team, and believe that would warrant a bullet point unto itself in terms of actions to achieve objectives.
Thank you. Go ahead, Mr. Kelly. And you know what? I totally missed that, but that is a very good point.
So, and thank you again for the question. So we've been through this Rose, I don't know, a dozen times or so. And in the champions line, the OVOHT was actually in there. We are a piece of that. I'll note as well, we are in an area where there are two OHTs. Of course, there's one in Arnprior. So while not as directly engaged as we are with OVOHT, it would be wise for us to include that OHT in there as well. So we will do that in terms of the champion level. Thank you.
Excellent. And I do see, before we move on here, I do see that we're still missing the message from the warden.
It has been updated.
Oh, good. Anything further on the strategic plan? Yes, member from North Algona Wilberforce.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I just had a question in regards to goal number 2, workforce development. Talks about internal HR strategy, about attracting, retaining people to work at the county. I know there was certainly discussion with Mr. Lockhart and some of the lower tiers. The challenge that every municipality has with retaining and attracting staff. And there was some discussion about a strategy that would maybe look at the competition that exists and the differences in some of the wage scales. And I just wondered in the details in the background on this report if any of that will be coming forward.
Mr. Kelly, we did have a fulsome discussion about that.
Thank you, Chair, and yes, we did. Thank you for the question. We certainly did, and it is in the background. How it gets incorporated into the county's strategic plan, it will be interesting because this isn't a strategic plan for the municipalities. This is for us. Now, I would suggest to you perhaps it's an HR strategy to retain people to work at the county. Maybe it's just in municipal governance, perhaps we could extend it. Delivering a county-wide wage grid was discussed, I believe, during those sessions, so we're all on the same page. It didn't rise to the acceptance level. There was some hesitance from some municipalities that, hold on a second, if municipality X and municipality Y are that dissimilar, how am I going to pay the same? So it is in the background. I think it's for discussion as we move forward, but it's not really something that we would necessarily lead, because that would be imparting our, well, thou shalt have a wage grid for everybody. So it's stayed away from that piece, at least on our behalf, as far as we saw it anyway.
Supplementary.
I'm just wondering if there would be a more broad, generalized way of looking at it. Here's the benchmark for these positions, here's the range, and at least for lower tiers, and we can see where we fit in those categories.
Thank you for that. I think we should leave that with staff to noodle on. Sure. Excellent. Anything further? Warden.
Thank you. Just to the last comment, I'm just wondering if that is under shared services and resources. If you look at the first bullet point, which says Municipal Shared Services Forum establishing an inventory of opportunities between the county and the local municipalities, or the third bullet, which says review policies regarding uploading, downloading, sharing, and update where necessary. That might fit in under those two as a part of the broader statement.
Excellent point. All right, anything further on the strategic plan? I have a mover and seconder on the floor, so I will call for the vote. All in favor? And can I get a mover and seconder for the CAO's report as a whole? Moved by the member from Laurentian Hills, seconded by the member from Killu, Haggerty, and Richards. Anything further? All in favor? Excellent, thank you. And now we will move on to Mr. Foss.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And again, good morning, members of the Finance and Admin Committee. My report begins on page 23 of your package. We specifically attempted to keep our report fairly light for the month of February, knowing, of course, that we have some budget discussions which will take place at the end of this report. Item number 1, and more so for our newer members of the committee, June of 2022, we reported that after a relationship of more than 40 years, Our audit firm of Scott, Rosine, Black & Locke would not be in a position to continue providing audit services for the County of Renfrew, and accordingly we went out through a request for proposal process and obtained an audit service agreement with KPMG through their offices in Perth and Kingston for a 5-year period, beginning with the 2022 fiscal year end. And attached as Appendix 1 is their detailed audit planning report for 2022. Not that I would intend to go through this report, and we did have some discussions with our audit team about whether they wanted, even on a virtual basis, to attend today's meeting and get to know you a little bit. Of course, they will be here in person later on this year to deliver their auditor's report on our financial statements for 2022. However, that was they were not available for today's meeting. So just wanted to highlight, if nothing else, just on page number 41, some of the key milestones in their engagement with us. Already, what has taken place is risk assessment and planning. So in the month of November 2022, they did perform preliminary risk assessment activities, most of that through a series of questionnaires about internal control activities here at the County of Renfrew. We had several planning meetings, finance staff with our audit team, and they did engage with Scott, Rosine, Black & Locke. Part of the transfer of the engagement from one audit team to another is understanding opening balances. And so they've satisfied themselves with all of the working papers and all of the files from our former auditors and are ready to engage with us directly for 2022. So some interim field work takes place, interim audits in the month of December. I can let you know that those are happening virtually. Welcome to the world of 2022 and working remotely and virtually, where we would typically have had from our local Pembroke office a number of staff from their office doing the interim field work right in our building. We are now engaging virtually, and we are passing information and uploading information to a Dropbox at KPMG so that they have an opportunity electronically and virtually to have a look at some of the detailed financial transactions for our organization and begin planning their audit activities. So it's something new for us as we move through our audit for the months of March and April. We are going to be almost exclusively dealing with that firm and engaging with that firm on a virtual basis with very limited on-site interaction from their team. So yeah, something new. Kind of looking forward to how this is going to work. We're pretty used to, and we're very familiar with the team from Scott, Rosine, and they actually come right into our office. They're just part of the family. They're part of the the wallpaper, so to speak. They're so used to how we work and how we do things that they don't ask questions anymore. They just go right into the files and help themselves. And so this will be kind of a new experience for us. In February, of course, this is their audit planning report to this committee. Their field work will be end of March and primarily the month of April. We will begin discussing our financial statements with them through the months of April and May, and then back to this committee for a presentation of the audited statements in June. So that's the timeline. Lots of work. The bulk of the work for their office is still to be done, but just wanted to highlight that for this committee. Item number 2, the Association of Municipalities of Ontario provides on an annual basis a statement of remuneration to those members who are appointed to their boards and committees. Of course, we had past Warden Debbie Robinson on the AMO Board of Directors, County Caucus, and as the EOWC Chair. AMO only reimburses for mileage, and meetings in 2022 were virtual, and so you'll see there was a blank expense report, but in keeping with their requirements, they have issued that statement to us. Item 3, similarly, and attached as Appendix 3 is a letter dated January the 30th from the Renfrew County and District Health Unit providing a statement of remuneration and expenses paid to county council members appointed to the Board of Health in 2022. Item 4, and on a regular basis, we bring forward just a summary of our workload in the Provincial Offences Department. And item number 5, a summary as well of the number of charges that are in, as we define them, in backlog at the POA court. Of course, the backlog really began for us in earnest with COVID-19 and the closure by the Ministry of the Attorney General of all provincial courts across the province. You'll see at the bottom line that in January of 2023, we had scheduled 6 court sessions in Renfrew County, and 2 of those courts were canceled. So we had 4 court sessions. All of them took place here in this building, downstairs in our POA court. But that has, again, those continued cancellations have created a backlog which currently sits at 1,329 charges. And you will note that that is down slightly from the past number of months. At our current rate, we would require about 55 court days to get through that backlog, or about 18, with our current number of court days that are being offered, about 18 months to clear that backlog. So item number 6, in connection with this issue, in January, our POA manager, Ashley Wilton, completed and submitted a critical incident report and filed it with the Ministry of the Attorney General. The report highlights the impact of these ongoing court closures and limited judicial resources here in Renfrew County specifically, but right across Eastern Ontario. And despite many requests to the Regional Senior Justice of the Peace to reallocate our satellite court dates back into our Killaloe, Deep River, and especially the Renfrew court area, we have had no response to date. There is certainly a concern from all of the enforcement agencies about the mounting backlog and the defendant's ability to access justice in a timely manner. And as I understand it, we had our very first our charter challenge, 11B charter challenge, that took place on Monday of this week, which is a person's right to be tried within a reasonable time limit. So we are exercising. There is certainly a requirement for all POA managers to separate the justice procedures in the courtroom from the administrative duties that we have. So this critical incident report that we're filing is specifically because of the administrative backlog that we are continually challenged with here in Renfrew County. We have no impact on the courtroom itself and how things are carried on in the courtroom, but from an administrative perspective, we wanted to do everything that we could, including this critical incident report, filing it with Toronto, with the Ministry of the Attorney General, to ensure that everybody understands what's taking place here in Renfrew County. It is not dissimilar to some other regions in the province, but we want to ensure that that our needs are being considered by MAG as well. Item number 7, we have a call for provincial action on property assessments, AMO, and we have attached as Appendix 4 is a letter from Colin Best, the AMO president, to the Honorable Peter Bethenfalvy, Minister of Finance, regarding the delay, if you will, on the municipal assessment cycle. We do typically have a property assessment to a new and current value every 4 years in this province, and then that impact of that once every 4-year assessment is phased in through the property tax base on a 4-year basis. That has not happened. We are still operating on an assessed value of 2016, and so AMO is highlighting on behalf of all municipalities our wishes to return to this process to ensure that we have updated assessed values in order to apply our tax policy to. Madam Chair, those are the information items before I get to the budget, so perhaps I'd stop there.
Thank you. All right, we'll go back to information item number 1, our new auditors, KPMG. Warden.
Thank you. Through you to Mr. Foss. When I look at slide 30, which is page 55, Appendix 3, it talks about development of a PS 3280 compliant policy. So I'm curious, anytime PSAB drops a new policy on us, it costs us money. So is this going to be expensive?
Mr. Foss.
Thank you, Chair, and through you. So one of the issues that is facing Ontario municipalities with respect to this new public sector requirement has to do with asset retirement obligations and what impact they would have on the financial position of any Ontario municipality, and for us, specifically the County of Renfrew. We've had some preliminary, so rather than it being an asset management related regulation within PSAB, it is asset retirement obligation, typically dealing with those assets that may have some impact related to landfills and closure, brownfields, those types of assets. For the County of Renfrew, we believe we have very limited exposure because of this PSAB directive, but we are engaging with KPMG now, and we will continue to until they present their financial statements in June, and we may have some notes to this effect in our financial statements. We don't believe that there is any heightened issues for us to be concerned about here in the County of Renfrew, but you know, KPMG obviously is working with many Ontario municipalities on this same requirement, and so we're anxious to hear from them about our level of exposure with respect to asset retirement obligations. So more to follow. I wouldn't say at this point there's any money connected to it. However, it certainly is an obligation for us to report on these types of issues. So certainly more to follow. Thank you.
Thank you. Supplementary, Warden.
Good news. So if I follow that to the end of my trail on that, then essentially our retirement obligations, if I equate it to a retired landfill site, we would be responsible for our salt domes and our fueling depots in our yards, if I look at the county operations over the last 150 odd years. Okay, thank you.
Excellent. Anything further on 1? On 2, AMO remuneration. 3, Board of Health remuneration. The member from Deep River, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a general question around remuneration statements and the requirement for us to post them, make them public, whatever that is. Does adding them to the agenda of a committee or county council, does that meet that requirement for posting them, or do we actually have to do something else?
That's a very interesting question. I think Mr. Foss will find out and get back to us.
Thank you, Madam Chair. You know, I'm going to equate that to our requirement to provide to the public a summary of remuneration and expenses paid to our councillors, our 17 councillors. How do we make that a public document? Well, it's certainly presented in a public forum, and it's provided publicly to our website through our committee and council reports. Your question specifically is the external boards. So those boards have a responsibility to report publicly on remuneration for councillors, which they have done. And I guess what we are doing is including it in our report, which will be published publicly on our website as part of this report and County Council's report, so that the public are made aware of or have the resources available to review the remuneration paid to county councillors who sit on external boards and agencies. So I believe that through that, we have fulfilled our obligations on publicly reporting because we don't do it in any other mechanism. We don't put it in the local newspapers or any other type of reporting. It is through this public forum and then through our posting of these reports on our website.
Thank you for that. Anything further on 3? 4, the POA workload. Number 5, the my apologies, the member from North Algona-Wilberforce.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And just looking at charges received once again from October to January this year, the number of charges is decreasing, which certainly has an impact on our revenue. I'm just hopeful that there's no relation between the reduced number of charges and the court backlog from a position of, well, what's the use of filing charges when the possibility of a lot of them being thrown out becomes evident when you look at the time to have them dealt with.
That's a good point. Number 5, the POA backlog. Seeing none. Number 6, the critical incident report. And number 7, AMO's call for provincial action on property assessments. I will just relate, I don't know if if any of the other members have had MPAC come to their local municipalities, but we had a presentation by MPAC in Bonnechere Valley. We had heard previous that they would be using 2019 values. I will tell you in the slide deck, it was very clear on one slide that it was 2023 to 2027. This is highly concerning, going from 2016 values to potentially 2023 values. We all know the housing boom during the pandemic. So I think this is something that all of our municipalities need to keep an eye on. Yes, member from North Algona-Wilberforce.
I tend to agree with you, and when you're trying to do a municipal budget, it's very difficult to figure out where you want your tax rate to fall if all of a sudden property values are going to skyrocket.
And we did impart that to the delegation from MPAC. This is highly concerning, so I'm glad that AMO's on it. And I also, in my orientation with Roma on Monday, I'm also going to talk about it with the Roma board. So, and I know Peter's all over it as well. Okay, anything further on 7? I see none. With that, I think before we get into the budget, because I know that it's, yes, member from Mustin Bromley.
Thank you. Just perhaps a point of order perspective, just in response to Councillor Doncaster's query with respect to remuneration. So I went to the letter, excuse me, the letter provided by RCDHU, Ms. Daly, and it cites Section 284 of the Municipal Act, and it doesn't require posting. I'll read it. The treasurer of a municipality shall in each year on or before March 31st provide to the council of the municipality an itemized statement on remuneration. So as long as the treasurer has provided it to council, the requirement is met.
Thank you for doing some research. It's good to know. Yes, member from Deep River.
Thank you. That's very helpful, actually.
Yeah, it really is.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. All right, before we get into the budget, because as we all know, this week has been quite something when it comes to budgets, and I can see you're all laughing after our marathon meetings this week. I think we'll take 5 minutes. Everybody regroup, get some water, coffee, bio break, and we'll come back and get into the budget. Thank you. Tina, can you take Welcome back, everyone, and thanks for adhering to the almost 5-minute rule. At this time, we are going to turn it over, I believe, to Daniel, to Mr. Oh, no, Jeff, you're good. Okay, to Mr. Foss, to present our departmental budget for 2023. Would you like to read the recommendation first, please, so we can get it on the floor?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I will just get back to the recommendation. Okay.
Chair, if you don't mind, and I know people have heard it, so I'm not going to do it verbatim, but especially for this committee and this staff, I want to thank Jeff and Daniel and all his team for all the work they put behind this budget and all of the budget workshop. I know that there have been several little nuances and innuendos, I guess, and suggestions throughout the week, and thank you for those. We've noted all of them. They will be incorporated into the budget workshop documents in some fashion next week. But again, thank you to Jeff and Daniel for this one. This one was, again, particularly hard. We are cognizant of the caps and cognizant of all the pressures, as you are and as you've heard this week. But again, like I've said all week, thank you to everyone involved. And we too live here and want to make sure that we are reasonable in our approach. But there was a large level of creativity for the FNA budget this year, knowing the strap plans coming forward, knowing some other items of interest have raised themselves since council's taken over and since last council left. So again, I look forward to engaging with you on this budget moving forward. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, and yes, thank you so much to you and your whole team, Mr. Foss. And I'm really glad that we have scheduled 2 days for budget. I think for the first time in many years, I think we're going to need both full days. So good thinking, Rose, for scheduling that. And I will turn this back to Mr. Foss for the recommendation, please.
Item number 8 under resolutions then is a recommendation that the Finance and Administration Committee recommends that the draft 2023 budgets for all divisions reporting to this committee be forwarded. It does read be approved and forwarded in keeping with other committees that have taken place this week. We are amending this resolution to simply read, be forwarded to the February 22nd, 2023 County Council Budget Workshop for approval.
Thank you. And I believe everybody has been in one committee or another this week, and we all agreed that we are moving them forward, but we are not recommending the budgets as they set. Can I get a mover and seconder? Mover is the member from Deep River. Seconder is the member from Killaloe, Haggerty, and Richards. And now that I've got it on the floor, I will send it back to you, Mr. Foss, to go over your departmental budget. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And we'll really begin in the package on page number 63, which is really a summary, again, of all of those departments that are reporting up and through to this committee. We've placed it on the television monitors as well so that we can all follow along. But as you'll note, we have a number of departments, members of council, general administration, IT, human resources, small budgets for publicity and for agriculture and reforestation, provincial offenses administration, MPAC, as well as a general area entitled financial expense. Likewise, there are a group of revenues dominated, of course, by the county levy, which some committee should be tackling to forward that through to the budget workshop, and traditionally this committee has always done that. Again, just you'll see a very familiar layout for the presentation of these budgets for these departments for our committee this morning. Really just starting at the very middle of the sheet of numbers, you'll see a column titled 2022 budget, and of course that was the council approved budget from last year. Immediately to the left of that column, we have our 2023 budget baseline. And as we've said with other committees, what we attempted to do from a presentation point of view was to let council or this committee know that if we maintained our current level of service, status quo, if you will, we call it baseline, that these would be the budgets for these various committees. So our very first variance column then identifies the difference between 2022 budget and our baseline, our current level of service. And to the left of the baseline would be then what would those service level reductions need to be in order for us to achieve the target that Council set for us in September of 22, which was a 2.5% increase on the levy. To the left of that is the budget as it would be presented, meeting that 2.5% target. And then the very farthest column to the left-hand side is budget enhancements. And we have a number of departments where we would like Council to consider budget enhancements that are not captured or included in those baseline budgets. So with that, I'll just really quickly just going down the percentage columns, and you will note that each one of these budgets began higher than the 2.5%, and you'll notice that each one of those budgets then come in at, or we have a plan, if you will, in order to meet Council's target of 2.5% for each one of those budgets. So I guess I'll begin then with the next page, which would be members of Council. And we at a staff level really, as we start to build the budget, finance staff, we had a look at developing, our group of budgets before we even met with the various different departments and assisted them in building their budget, identifying what the costs are to date and how it would be that we get them toward the 2.5% target. And because we had already developed our own budgets as a bit of a template, we have been using members of Council to demonstrate to Public Works and Community Services, long-term care, paramedic services, sort of some of the challenges that are before each one of us as we strive to hit this target. So members of Council, you'll note the 2022 budget, the municipal cost, the municipal levy, $529,954, and the status quo would be a budget for 2023 of $607,000. That's a 14.7% increase for members of Council. So there was a really good example for all of our departments as we built budgets of the kind of challenges and pressures that are going on even with our members of Council. So what's really driving this cost? Well, if you look sort of toward the bottom of that list of expenses, you'll see Council salary. And Council salary has jumped up by $21,974. You only had $13,000 to work with to stay within your cap of 2.5%. So salaries alone, we're going to push this department over the 2.5% cap. What happened with salaries? In 2022, we engaged with a third party called the Gallagher Group to do a Council remuneration survey. That analysis was done end of 21 and early in 2022, and in May of 2022 we presented to this Council the survey results. So we essentially compared Council salaries, County Council salaries, to 9 or 14 of our peers in Eastern Ontario with similar sized populations and similar sized budgets. And that salary survey indicated that at the time, our Council members, as a base salary, were receiving $14,283 or $53 per year in salary. And the 55th percentile of those other comparator municipalities, the salary was at $20,285. So Council of the day in 2022 considered this and adopted a resolution that beginning in 2023, our current year, and our first months of compensation, salary should change to being the 2022 level plus 1/4 of the difference between 14,253 and 2285. And so what we're looking at in this budget pressure column is the outcome of that council decision to increase salaries by about $6,000 over this 4-year period. In addition to this phased-in salary change, any COLA that would be recommended for non-union staff would also be applied to council. And so the COLA that was set for us in 2023 is 2%. So that is the impact. That's one of the biggest driving forces behind the budget increases for members of council, is the phase-in of the Gallagher report. The first year of it, plus 2%, is increasing county council costs, salary costs, by $21,974. The other item that's changing pretty significantly would be council mileage. You'll see that last year's budget was $12,400. Of course, that budget was set in the middle of the pandemic when most of our activities were taking place virtually. So we are suggesting that as a baseline should return to a level of about $35,000. And of course, the other item is council benefits. We never know from one council to the next how many of our 17 members are interested in electing to engage with our benefit package through Manulife. And 12 of our members for this term of council are utilizing Manulife benefits. And so that increase to $78,000, that's reflective of our current costs for our current elected councillors to participate in that benefit package. So you'll see that we are at 14.7%. Unlike all of the other departments, this is the first time that we've engaged directly with members of council on your own departmental budget. And so we have just made some suggestions for how are we going to be able to get this department down to 2.5%, similar to all the other departments. And so some of these recommendations are not palatable. We understand that, but this is the exercise that every department has had to go through in order to meet council's target of 2.5%. So our suggestions would be on those items that have some discretion to them, if you would call it that. We have a budget for council conventions, which allocates up to $3,900, or historically had allocated up to $3,900 per council member to attend conferences and conventions. So, I mean, what we're looking at as far as a potential savings would be to reduce that to $1,000 per councillor at only $16,000 in total. Council hospitality at $20,000, that's essentially what takes place next door for lunches and those sorts of things. $10,000 reduction to that budget line, a $10,000 reduction to council mileage. How are we going to accomplish that? Well, the only way that we did during the pandemic was to move to virtual meetings. And so didn't spend mileage for councillors to attend in person. So a potential savings of $10,000 in that area. Advocacy and delegations, that's a budget we created a number of years ago so that council had sufficient resources to engage with the province for matters that were important to the residents of Renfrew County. So we're recommending $20,000 from that line item. And then on an annual basis, we had a budget last year of $10,000 for a warden's banquet at the end of a term of warden, and recommending that be eliminated as well. That's $64,500 in total reductions, and that does bring this department down to the 2.5% budget target. One other item that we just like to bring to your attention, in the budget enhancement column, you'll see $12,000 under public relations that did not exist before. Essentially what that is to engage or continue to engage with our third-party contractor who essentially typically sits at the back of the table. and provides all of the technical assistance to be able to broadcast these committee meetings as well as the budget workshop and county council on an ongoing basis. The $12,000 number essentially would allow us to continue to have the third party continue to work with us on county council days, and only on county council days, to ensure that we have all of the technical resources available to us to ensure that county council days, those broadcasts go off without a hitch, if you will. And so that would be a budget enhancement. It's not a budget that exists now, but a budget enhancement to continue with that relationship. And although our staff, Tina and I'm not sure who else is hiding there, Tyson is hiding behind the monitor, are doing their very best to continue with this. That budget would represent that continued involvement. During COVID, and when we moved to a virtual presentation, we had funding available to us, federal Safe Start funding, which was allowing us to cover these costs under COVID containment and management activities. But obviously we're all back in chambers now, and we did move back in chambers in 2022, so that funding is no longer available for COVID mitigation costs. And so if we wanted to continue with that relationship, that would be a budget enhancement for us. So Madam Chair, maybe that's all I would present for members of council. The rest of my team will take their budgets individually to present them. I'm not sure if you wanted to discuss each department and then move on, and if so, that's the members of council.
Thank you. So we'll open it up to comments, questions, concerns, or do we want to leave this for budget workshop? I have a couple of concerns, but I'll leave it till then. And I think that if you wouldn't mind, Mr. Foss, if you could check with Tina and Tyson back there, are they comfortable in their new roles as our tech gurus? I think that that's very important information for council to have. Yes, the member from Killaloe, Hegarty and Richards, please.
As I'm a new person on the block, just a question. In the columns, you have 2019 actual, 2020 actual, and 2021. Why would we not have 2022 actual?
Because it's not finalized yet.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I was just afraid that Mr. Foss was going to give you a 10-minute dissertation on why 2022 wasn't finalized. Yes, the member from Admiston Bromley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I was going to reserve this till the end because it's a process, but certainly since my colleague from Killaloe, Hegarty Richards has broached the conversation, of course the actuals can't be presented, but right through all of the budgets that I have participated in as 2015 forward, between 2015 and the development of the 2019 budget, we had a forecast of what the prior year would be. And that's when we were doing budget workshop actually in January. So we are in February. Is it possible, two things, I guess. I'd like to see a return to that as we are budgeting on an annual basis. But even between now and budget workshop, is it possible to have a projection of the 2022 ending? And I gather, or certainly would acknowledge that there's probably a lot of accruals to do with respect to the year-end audit, but even a projection of where we have been doing. That was consistently provided to council at budget time, as I say, right through until the development and inclusive of 2019.
I will turn it over to Mr. Foss, but when I was reading our budget packages, the one thing that I noted over and over and over again is that realistically, we need to be looking at 2019 numbers and moving forward with 2023. Obviously, 2020, 2021, and even into 2022 were not indicative of true budget items. So, but I will turn it over to Mr. Foss and ask him if that's possible, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I think what the request is can we include a column of 22 forecast in the package, which will be going out tomorrow for all of County Council? What a forecast would involve, of course, is some pretty significant effort on behalf of my colleagues, each one of the directors, who would have to spend every waking hour from now until tomorrow at around noon when we send out this package in creating a forecast for you. I don't, even if that was possible, I don't think that there would be any value in those numbers because, you know, the effort required in understanding year-end forecasts for all of those departments, we wouldn't be putting the proper time and effort into it to giving you anything that would be reasonably accurate that you could use to make some decisions on. I will note that this same request from Councillor Donahue came forward last year at this time, and that there was a motion that he placed on the floor to this effect. The motion was not seconded, and we did not move forward with a motion to include 2022 forecasts in the 2023 budget column. And so based on that, we did not develop or spend any time throughout the fall as we developed this package for you in estimating or forecast what the 2022 forecast would be. So that's why it's not here today, and certainly it would be next to impossible to try and do that this afternoon or tonight or early in the morning. Thank you.
Thank you. Supplementary, member from Edmundston Bromley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So certainly acknowledging the substantial effort that would have to go into this, obviously would not be ready to be provided tomorrow. And if in fact, so that motion would have been made, if that was a year ago, then a year has lapsed, then presumably it would be something that could be reintroduced. I'm going to hold that in abeyance just for a moment though, but I will return. So in the budgeting for 15, 16, 17, 18, and 19, it was presented. There was a forecast column, the prior year's forecast column, and then it ceased in 2020. And I'm pretty sure Council didn't make a motion to remove it as part of the budgeting process, and yet it did disappear from the protocol, the standard operating procedure. So I'm just wondering if that was, if in fact I had missed something and Council had directed that no longer be part of the budget package.
Mr. Foss, do you know the answer to that? You do not. I think we'd have to look back at minutes. Go ahead.
Okay, that being the case, then I'm you know, that's not, I don't think that's salient, but I think that it did add value in each of the development of those budgets in those years that I'm referring to. That I cannot recall what the discussion may have been a year ago. I did not actually even recall making the motion, but if that being the case, then in preparation for the 2024 budget, I would move that part of the process be that all of these packages, each of the committees, and in fact at budget workshop, do provide some forecast of the prior year's expenditures.
So you're making that motion now?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Do you have a seconder? The member from Killaloe, Hegarty, and Richards. Discussion. Yes, member from Edmundston Bromley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The particular challenge for me now this year is, given the change in the regime for the inauguration of new councils, the moving ahead of that by a month this year. In fact, so certainly none of the new members of council would be privy to this, but the last treasurer's report that we saw was June 30th. So I don't have anything. In all past years, at least we would have received the treasurer's report as of the end of September, typically in the November meeting. But because everything has been cascaded backwards because of that change, the best I can do is pull up the report that I think we may have seen, the treasurer's report that is, that we may have seen in August. Perhaps it was September, with the ending period being June 30th. So that's a particular challenge even this year, and I understand that the practice here at the county, and typically is that we budget on budget, but there is certainly some value in seeing what our actuals are in relation to prior years. So in any event, that's notwithstanding having said that, I recognize the challenge that it is impossible to achieve this year, but I think we should return to that regime.
And I had thought of that last month for FNA, but it was really wonky with the November being that sort of flex time and then December only the inaugural. So yes, but definitely something we should get on the books. At this point, though, we do have a motion on the floor. Would this committee like to forward to County Council the idea that we would have in all departments a forecast, because it's not just finance and admin. Yes, member from Evanston Bromley.
Perhaps on a point of order, I believe that the budget process is the domain of this committee, correct? I will certainly defer to Mr. Kelly, but I believe that the authority in terms of how we budget, I'm not proposing to change any of the numbers, particularly not those numbers represented by my co-chairs that are in the room, but I think in the process, that is the domain of this committee.
Through you, Chair, as I understand it, is part of the terms of reference that this committee sets the terms on how, well, recommends to County Council the schedule and all these other items that go along with the budget process, yes.
I believe it still has to go to County Council as a recommendation from FNA.
I wonder if you could verify that from the terms of reference are contained within the procedural bylaw.
We'll just pause here for a moment because we do have this motion on the floor.
My quick read, say if I can, Chair. Item number 7 of the terms of reference, develop and prepare the annual budget under the jurisdiction of this committee. So it means the items you're referring to today, and to receive from each of the other committees of council and from any joint committees or boards the annual operating and capital budgets of these committees, joint committees. Hold on 1 second. To compile the budgets, to compile such projected budgets into a consolidated County of Renfrew budget for general purposes, and to present the consolidated budget at the budget workshop, and to prepare the budget bylaws and the levy bylaw to County Council. Sorry, I'm just looking as well for any other schedule.
Yes, member from Laurentian Hills.
So my comment on this is I would like to know the reasoning behind why that column was taken out before I can vote on this or not. So I don't know if this motion can be deferred, because I don't expect.
With respect to the whole idea of forecasting, the forecasts depend on the level of effort and expertise for each one of the directors and their managers and their departments. Historically, we've had differences in the accuracy of the forecasts that were coming forward to this committee or to the budget workshop, and some very large variances between the forecasts presented at the budget workshop and the final financial results some months later when the actuals were presented to committee, typically in April or so of every year. So I think that was part of the discussion, but I certainly can't recall. It's an estimate, it's a forecast, and if you do an awful lot of work in ensuring that your forecasts are good, then it's probably some valuable information that's coming forward. If you're not doing an awful lot of effort and putting a lot of work into it to ensure that it's as accurate as possible, then you've got big differences between forecasts and actual financial results, which it may not be as helpful to councillors as they kind of consider that information at budget time. So I believe that was part of the genesis of it, but I can't really recall.
Also, accountants don't like estimates. Yes, go ahead. I'm right, Jeff? Yes, go ahead, Mr. Kelly.
So as I read it, and I'm open to interpretation, but so the number one scope of responsibility is consider and make recommendations to County Council on program standards and funding for effective and efficient service delivery of administration, treasury, human resources, et cetera, that you hear here. So if we take that the Treasury Department is responsible for delivering the budget. Item number 2 would say, review, consider, and make recommendations to County Council on any matters pertaining to policy development and policy change which has effect upon the functions of the committee, as noted in one above. So I would interpret that the development of a policy for the schedule of budget, so the budget workshop schedule and how it's laid out in terms of timing is something that flows through this department as recommended by the treasurer for recommendation and consideration and recommendation here by this committee to County Council, and doesn't sit solely with this committee.
Thank you for the clarification. Member from Edmundston Bromley, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I think perhaps to get to the last chapter a little bit more quickly, since it can't be done for this year, I don't think we need to belabor at this point, but I would wish to take I certainly am subject to my colleague from KHR would withdraw this because the only thing I would like to say, and I think it is incumbent upon us to give careful consideration at a future time when we may not be as time sensitive, I would suggest that number 7 within the terms of reference for the finance administration are in conflict in my interpretation of what Mr. Kelly has suggested. Just to read to them, not to belabor, but item 7 clearly says, develop and prepare the annual budget under the jurisdiction of this committee and to receive from each of the other committees of council from joint committees annual operating and capital budgets, etc. So I would certainly say develop and prepare the budget says that it is entirely within our domain to develop and prepare the budget as we see the process being appropriate. However, having said that, I will withdraw my motion to reintroduce at a later day, subject to my colleague.
Thank you. Is the member from Killaloe, Hegarty, and Richards in agreement with withdrawing?
Yeah, we could defer it for another meeting.
Thank you. All right. And now we will move along to administration.
So, Madam Chair, I have each member of our Corporate Services Management team here this morning, and so I've asked them to each take an opportunity to go through their budgets, their departmental budgets, in essentially the same form and format as we did with County Council. And I guess we'll begin with Daniel Burke, who's the Manager of Finance.
Good morning. So you'll note at the bottom of the same page, which is number 64, the general administration budget begins. For budget purposes, this department includes all of the finance division, as well as the treasurer, CAO, deputy clerk, and media relations. In our status quo budget, you will note that we come in at 4.9% over the prior year budget. The primary driver of this increase is staffing changes. You will note that salary costs are down slightly. This is a function of the turnover inside of the finance department. And new staff typically start at a lower rate than their retiring predecessors. In order to ensure that each of our cost-shared or funded departments gets a portion of the costs associated with finance, we use a series of internal charges to apportion staff time. So as our salary costs and benefit costs drop, so too do our recoveries from other departments. It's good news for those other departments, but it does create a pressure inside of the finance and admin division. In order to meet the council target of 2.5%, we have identified the best area that we feel is appropriate for reduction, and I will elaborate on what that is in a closed session. With that reduction, we can meet our council target of 2.5%. In addition to our budget, we have $150,000 in our enhancement column That is to say, a proposal to do more than we have done in the prior years. This enhancement is made up of a number of items coming out of the strategic plan. They are all displayed inside of this department for ease of reference and discussion rather than spreading them throughout the budget document. They include a community needs analysis, a housing study, and a climate action plan. And with that, that is a very brief overview of the admin.
Thank you very much, Mr. Burke, and we will, yes, we will go into closed when we're done with this particular budget and come back to those items. But does anybody have any questions or concerns with the administration budget? I see none. Good work. Now we're going to move over to information technology, please.
Thank you, Chair. Through you to committee. So starting with the IT budget on page 65 at the top, we are coming in with our baseline budget at 10.9% above the 2022 budget at $526,587. In order to meet Council's 2.5% target, that would represent a $40,000 pressure in the IT budget. And that pressure is made up in three areas. The first I'd like to draw to your attention is under the annual software maintenance fees line, where we're showing a pressure of $20,000, and that's directly related to our cybersecurity training program. So back in 2018, when we rolled out our training program, we trained all county staff that had email accounts. Then starting in 2019 through to 2022, we had to reduce those licenses and those numbers that we could run through the training program to just new employees. Since 2019 to 2022, we've only been training the new people. But with the ever-evolving cybersecurity threat and landscape that we're seeing nowadays, it's probably time to bring all the county staff and run them through the training program again. So that requires additional licenses for that program. The second item, budget pressure I'd like to bring to your attention is under the communication fees line, where we could defer the purchase of 3 network switches for this building. And the last budget pressure would be under the computer technology supplies line, where we would have to defer the purchase of a couple of laptops for IT staff. Now looking at the budget enhancement column, we have a $130,000 enhancement fee here, and this is directly related to 2 business cases that are in your package on page 73 and 74. Both of these business cases came about from the digital strategy that was developed and released in 2022. So the first business case that we have listed here on page 73 is to change the administrative assistant 2 position in the IT division, which is a group 3, to a help desk position, which would be a group 4. There would be no change in additional hours, just a position change. This position change is a direct result of the digital strategy that was developed by the Perry Group consulting firm, and this would provide a more technical function for the help desk than just a standard administrative level person. And just for your information, on an average, we receive about 8,200 support calls a year. So this person would be very busy to help out and be the first point of contact within the department to do some technical stuff. So we'd be looking at a financial consideration of about $10,000 in salary. The second business case, again, resulting from the digital strategy, is for a new position, a as a business analyst in Group 8 at an increase of 18-20 hours. So this is a new position. With the digital strategy, the Perry Group did identify that we don't have this position currently within the staff of the IT department. And what this position would do would be to help define requirements and analyze current systems and determine specifications for new systems and solutions. The digital strategy report identified 40-plus projects that are high priority, and that the business analyst would definitely take a lead in managing and working through all the departments. So here again, we have a financial consideration of an additional $120,800 and 1,820 hours to the IT department. And that concludes my summary of the IT budget.
Thank you very much. Comments, questions, concerns on IT? The member from Killaloe, Haggerty and Richards, please.
If the business analyst goes through, do you need a support staff for that person?
No, it would be just that one position, and then they would be supported by the current IT staff.
Thank you. Anything? Oh, the member from Abniston Bromley, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you to Mr. Rinn, will there be, so in this evolution, will there still be some administrative support provided by this person, given the administrative role that is being removed?
The help desk position would do a bunch of the functions that the administrative assistant level position did do with the enhanced technical abilities.
Okay. Anything further? Good job, Chris. And now we will move over to HR. Mr. Bellamore, please.
Thank you, Chair, and through you to committee. At the bottom of page 65 in your package is the Human Resource Department budget for this year. So similar theme as everyone else. Our 2022 budget was $254,064. Our status quo budget would be a 14% increase at $289,687. You can see some of the large variances there being the salaries line, the benefits associated with employees, as well as a reduction in our purchase services and a change to our municipal recoveries, which is based on our projection of where 2022 will end. This is how we created that for the baseline for next year. To achieve the council target, we actually came in at 2.2 with $30,000 of changes, mainly being $5,000 in our office expense line, deferring a computer purchase, purchase services reduction, municipal recovery increasing it to $95,000, and reducing the travel budget by $5,000.
Congratulations, Greg. I think you're the only one. All right. Any comments, questions, concerns for HR? I see none, and we will move on. I'm assuming I'm throwing this back to you, Mr. Foss. Oh, POA. My apologies. I went right past you there.
Okay, so for POA, we're on page 66, and to keep our status quo, we're looking at a 6.9% increase, so a variance of $34,251. The main driving forces for that is the same as what other people have been mentioning, salaries and benefits, as well as we've seen our banking service fees kind of go up this past year or so. Our way to meet the pressures is kind of hand in hand with the fact that satellite courts are closed, so we know, at least for this year, some of those fees for rental fees, travel fees, and things like that, we are showing a reduction in, as well as our adjudication charges will be down because the justice of the peace situation. For our enhancements, the main one we would have is there's a bit of a change in how we were looking at the prosecution services. So rather than having a purchase for service of prosecution, we are going to look at having the in-house model. So there's a difference there. And that's pretty much it on that. I don't know, Ms. Foss, if we want to would now be the time to go into that prosecution business case. So with that, we were looking at going back to a model that we previously had where the prosecutor is actually a County of Renfrew employee. We found that this might be something that is a better method, and we've had it previously, and it kind of just allows more for performance management, things like that. But we also came to a crossroads a couple months ago where our current prosecutor was appointed as a justice of the peace. So we were looking kind of automatically, we had to go to what's our next step. And at that point, we did go into recruitment for an in-house prosecutor. And that falls in line in this business case. It's something that's been looking at for a number of years with the Ministry of Attorney General. We're looking at the download of Part 3 matters, and that will fall on the County of Renfrew to provide services for, and we'll need some more hours to be able to do that as well.
Excellent, thank you. And I see Mr. Foss had his hand up there.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. So no surprise to this committee, certainly our returning members, that you know, the Justice of the Peace issue has been a huge challenge for us in Eastern Ontario, and we heard some rumors that our contracted service with a third-party prosecutor who was prosecuting all matters in our POA court, not an employee, but a third-party prosecutor. We have a contract with that prosecutor. That individual, of course, had put their name forward for a Justice of the Peace, recognizing that shortage, and was successful in being appointed to a justice to be a Justice of the Peace for the Pembroke Court area. So that's been that's really good news for us. It helps to solve one problem, but of course that was our third-party contractor. So now we have nobody to prosecute matters in our own provincial offences court. So a bit of a crossroads. Do we go out and try and find another paralegal third-party contractor who will provide that same service as we were receiving from his grant? Or do we go back to a model that we had years ago where we had our own staff that were municipal employees and working with us for the prosecuting services in our court? And so we thought in January that we would go out with a recruiting effort to see if we could find a prosecutor, and really pleased to find that an individual by the name of Ms. Tara Lee Hay applied for and went through the application process and the interview process, and we have selected her to be our new municipal prosecutor as a County of Renfrew staff member. Ms. Hay comes from a provincial offences court in the City of Ottawa and has up to about 10 years experience as a prosecutor. She is also a professor at Algonquin College teaching the paralegal course. So she lives, as I understand it, sort of in the middle of our county in Renfrew, and so instead of driving into Ottawa on a daily basis to act as their prosecutor, turns the other way, goes against the traffic, and is coming up here to be our prosecutor. So we're really, really pleased that this has worked out for us. Of course, we had it as a business plan for you to consider, but we were forced into this situation over the last month to doing something to be able to continue prosecuting in our own POA court. So really pleased that this is how things have turned out. I believe Ms. Hay last week was her very first court day working here, and it's very obvious that she has a great deal of confidence and experience acting in that role. So rather than going through an onboarding and training exercise, we have somebody who has lots of experience and can jump right in and help us out. So really happy to be able to report that to you. There's a bit of a timing issue. Of course, here we are bringing this business plan to you to suggest that we would like to go back to this model, and as things turned out, we are back to this model, and are really pleased at how things have worked out. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Yeah, sort of weird timing, but I do think that it makes a heck of a lot of sense. All right, anything on POA? I see none. And we're back over to you, Mr. Foss.
So the last section.
My apologies. The member from Edmundston Bromley, please.
I am sorry, Madam Chair, I was tardy in raising my hand. I note that we are still budgeting for significant fee revenue. Do we have anticipation? I think that might be reflective of what had kind of been the standing, those are only showing actuals, unfortunately, back through 2019. I think that 1.5 had been a kind of a consistent target. Do we have some expectation that we might return to that? Ultimately, that the volumes, or rather the dollars, were some indication of the direction of the warden a year ago, and that was renewed in January again of this year, of correspondence to the Attorney General. So do we have some expectation of returning to a more typical, let us say, regime in terms of fines levied?
Who wants to tackle that? Oh, okay.
It's a tough call for sure. We're definitely going up in our ones coming in, but we can't really say for sure, I guess, at this time. But we're definitely seeing the trend going back towards what we previously were, and we're also having more trials with completion of cases, so we'll see those revenues coming in kind of throughout this year, I'm sure.
Thank you for that. Okay, back over to you.
And I'm wondering if Daniel has the ability to move us down to the, oh, okay, so I think,
I'm going to unpack.
right, well, let me go back
Next
up.
one, Daniel. Oh, the two little ones, yeah. There's ag and reforestation and...
Sorry, Madam Chair, I'm just going to catch up to wherever our presenter is at.
That's why I didn't throw it to POA, because there were two little ones.
Right, so we have, at the top of your screen, we have a very small budget that's, again, kind of somewhat orphaned, but finance and administration, certainly our administration department is sort of responsible for this publicity budget of $15,000. There's no change being recommended from prior years. The publicity budget is a bit of a catch-all for any activities that we're engaged in for publicity purposes. It may be a variety of things. I think Rose is very involved in our publicity budget, and some of those things that may have County of Renfrew stamps on them, or names, or advertising, and so that is the budget for that particular department. Next is agriculture and reforestation. Oops, I'll try and catch up with that one. So the very first one is reforestation grants in lieu. It's been a budget that's been around for a very, very long time. There is a bylaw, bylaw 41-98, so it goes back a long time now, which determines that we compensate our lower tier municipalities, those municipalities who have county forests. And the concept behind that old bylaw was, of course, our local municipalities have to maintain roads, bridges, culverts, infrastructure in order for us to access those county forests. And so there was a bylaw that set a fee of $100 per acre multiplied by the upper tier and school board rates, and that we will compensate our local municipalities who invoice us for that arrangement in accordance with that bylaw. Again, it was a bylaw that was set in 1998 and determined that there was some cost involved in maintaining this infrastructure so that we could access county forests in those municipalities. The other one is forest fire protection, and likewise, there was an agreement, goes back to 01, County Council resolution in 01, April of 01, that $1.01 per hectare of county forests be identified and paid to municipalities, provided those municipalities have contracts with M&R for fire protection services for our county forests. And so there is a budget available for us to compensate those municipalities who are billing us for that arrangement, as provided that they have M&R contracted services. So.
Okay, let's just,
Okay.
I'll just do those two little ones. Okay, anything on publicity? Agriculture and reforestation. I have a question as to 19, 20, and 21 were all 15, 20. Why are we budgeting 5,000?
I believe that would be the maximum dollars that could be expended had all of those hectares been invoiced to us and had those municipalities been participating in an agreement with M&R. So we wanted to ensure we had sufficient dollars in the budget in case we were billed the maximum amount under those agreements.
The member from Admiston Bromley, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. A couple of questions, and they're similar in nature, but I think that they are on each of those particular line items independently. So picking up on the forest fire protection, particularly in where you had inquired, perhaps it is worth corresponding with lower tiers that obviously aren't participating if the full utilization would be 5,000 and it's been 1520. I'm just anticipating we could probably extend that 1520 all the way back to 01. It seems odd to me if there's a municipality that's at a lapse that I'm questioning if there is ultimately something on the order of $5,000 that would be eligible. It's probably appropriate that it is billed. Likewise, or perhaps on a somewhat different tangent, if Mr. Foss could repeat on the reforestation grants, and I understand this is essentially a payment in lieu, we're calling it grant in lieu. Is that also based on an acreage as well?
Through you, Madam Chair. So there is an assessed value agreed upon of $100 per acre of county forests that exist in local municipalities. And so it's $100 per acre times the number of acres in those county forests multiplied by the upper tier and school board rate. And so that is the essence of bylaw 4198. And the concept, of course, is to compensate local municipalities for maintaining that infrastructure so that we can access county forests.
Thank you for that, and I'm getting the nod from Mr. Davis, so good job. Yes, a supplementary member from Admiston Bromley.
Okay, so that I want to be crystal clear. So essentially, we're establishing an arbitrary number of the assessed value multiplied, because the curious thing that prompted this question is when I look at the actuals, once again, there's a pretty significant disparity between what we're budgeting and what the actuals are. The actuals seem to be about 75% of budget. But I'm kind of curious how we diminished in value from 2019 over 2020 unless we had assessed values drop. I can't imagine that the tax levies were dropping in those years. It just seems odd to me that there would be, I would have anticipated that this would be a constant straight line that would be going upwards unless the assessments, I cannot imagine, if we've established $100 as the assessment and the acres have stayed the same, I cannot imagine that we would be paying less in any year.
I had it in my head, I just wanted to make sure it's because of the education rates. Member from Deep River.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just curious, I'm assuming that these county forests are on municipal roads and not on county roads? Because if they're on county roads, then what is the expense to the lower tier municipality?
Do you want Jason to answer it? You're good? Go ahead, Mr. Foss.
I believe that the bylaw attempted to provide a fairly simple formula to compensate municipalities for an issue that came forward about maintaining infrastructure and on local roads. And even if the county forest is adjacent to a local road, a county road, there would potentially be local roads that our forestry activities would need to access to get onto a county road to get to the forest. So I think it was an attempt to sort of compensate somewhat municipalities for us using their infrastructure to access county forests. So, it goes back a long time. Who knows what the thought of the day was then, but that's the principle of what's behind it.
We really appreciate that answer. All right, we'll move to page 67 and back to Mr. Foss.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So the one item at the top of that page is MPAC. And so on an annual basis, we receive a letter from MPAC indicating what the total municipal levy is for the entire province of Ontario. And then a calculation is done then for the total municipal cost divided by the total assessment across the province of Ontario. And then our share is our percentage here in Renfrew County. What is our assessed value of all of our properties as a percentage of all of Ontario, multiplied by the municipal levy requirements for MPAC to maintain their services. So we received that letter on an annual basis, and I believe we brought that forward in January to this committee. And so their letter to us indicated that their requirements for 2023 are $1,540,414, which is actually $1,200 less than it was as a requirement in 2022. Below that budget is sort of that catch-all. We refer to it as financial expenses. So I'm just going to go down through the various different line items because they are somewhat unique. Second from the top is something entitled Assessment Review. It was brand new last year, and we engaged with a company called Municipal Tax Equity Consultants, asking them to do an audit of our entire assessment roll. As we are anticipating that reassessment will happen potentially in the 2024 year, so that we will move toward a more current market value assessment. Before that happens, we wanted to ensure that the baseline data for our assessment roll here in Renfrew County was accurate and complete and correct. So we engaged with MTE to do that at a cost of $22,000, and I believe the report that we brought back to this committee, I think it was in January as well, was that they have uncovered $60,000 of municipal revenue that was missed in error on that municipal assessed roll return. And so our return on investment for $22,000 is to have $60,000 of additional municipal revenue available to us for 2022 and each year thereafter. So good return on investment. Certainly your treasurers participated in this whole process, and I think it's very good for us to know that we have a clean returned roll file ready for the next reassessment before it comes. So that's what that $22,000 was last year that we are not doing again. We have, for many, many years, the next one provided an allowance for the county share of tax write-offs, and we maintain that at $300,000. This is certainly in partnership with each of your local municipalities, because as a write-off happens and those write-offs are approved at your local level, there's also county taxes that are being impacted by those write-offs. So we provide an allowance on an annual basis for our share of what those total write-offs may be, and you'll see that it's $300,000 this year, similar to what it was last year. In 2017, the actuals were $322,000, 178, 198 in 2020. They were 222,000, and in 2021 they went up above our budget to $360,000. So 300,000, we're maintaining that budget level for 2023. Provision for unallocated funds in our budgets that came forward to all committees this week. There is no miscellaneous, if you will, line item in anybody's budget. This is our miscellaneous budget for the County of Renfrew. So as we suggest each and every year, we are responsible for an organization that expends about $150 million a year, and so this is the only line item which is essentially miscellaneous. However, in 2022, we applied for and we received funding from the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing under their municipal modernization grants. We have received about $320,000 in funding from them to enhance our digital infrastructure in accordance with our digital review that took place last year. So there's a number of initiatives coming forward. Jason's at the back of the room. So there's the countywide ESRI initiative that's taking place. In our Human Resources Department, there's a whole new HRIS system that we've acquired and that we're beginning to implement. The Municipal Modernization Grant is a cost-sharing grant. And so of that $300,000, we had a recommendation last year that our share of the Municipal Modernization Grant comes from this budget line. So $171,000 of that $300,000 has already been committed as part of last year's council approval of moving forward with applying for and receiving funds under the Municipal Modernization Program. So 170 of that 300 is already allocated. So there's a little bit of room, $130,000. That's all we have as a miscellaneous account for an organization that expends $150 million a year. Next to that, you'll see a couple of debentures that the first one, the Claybank Bridge debenture, which we entered into in 2018, and it will expire in 2028. You will see that the interest is reducing by $11,000, but right below it, the principal portion of that debt is increasing by $11,200. And so no impact to our total budget, but just kind of moving from the interest to the principal category. Likewise, in 2020, we engaged in a debenture for Madawaska River Bridge. The interest on that will reduce by $9,000 to $81,000, and we will pay $9,000 more in principal on that activity. The next one is gas tax. Once we look at the revenue section of the budget, you'll see that our allocation for gas tax in 23 is $2,914,661. And in this account, we put all of that money into our reserves to be used primarily by the Public Works Department in funding our infrastructure renewal program in 2023. Below that, and in keeping with our long-term financial plan, is our transfer to our TCA renewal reserve. This year it's set at $7,360,000, which is essentially last year's $6.2 million, increased by the COLA of 2.5%. In addition, we take all of our CVA growth, which was 2.16%, and we transfer that typically to our TCA renewal reserve as well. That CVA growth this year, 2.16%, would be $1,089,000, but we've had to use some of that. And we talked earlier in the year about operations, earlier this week, about our operations committee and the changes that were made to our public works staff by the Gallagher report that was approved mid last year. So in order to ensure that that moves forward, we've had to use some of these, typically the transfer to TCA renewal reserve to offset some of the county levies to allow the Public Works Department to move forward with that compensation plan. Below that, we have our transfer to Public Works Capital Reserve. So on an annual basis, we are moving some of our levy dollars into Capital Works reserves, and Mr. Perkins and his team are expending those dollars on his capital program. SDIP savings. Returning council members will be familiar with the plan that we put forward to renovate this building. We had 5 commercial leases in the city of Pembroke where we had provincial offenses, childcare, social housing, and Ontario Works. We're all maintaining offices outside of this building, and the Renfrew County and District Health Unit were here as tenants. And a number of years ago, we had approval from council to move forward with a business plan to move all of our outside departments into this building so that we would all be under one roof. And certainly we proposed some efficiencies that would be gained by canceling those 5 commercial leases, bringing all those staff into this building. At the budget workshop next week, I'll review the details of that plan, but we have generated savings that total $466,000 per year. We're applying those savings for 7 years to pay for the renovation for this building, to bring all of those folks inside. And after 7 years, we will have $466,000 available to this council to invest as you wish, because those savings would no longer be needed. We will have fully repaid the renovation on this building. And other than that, I guess, Daniel, if you move us toward the revenue section, really not much is changing in the revenue section. I mentioned the gas tax. That's an allocation from the federal government through AMO and the provincial government that we receive. Our allocation for this year is $2.9 million. That's an increase, but we're putting that all into our Capital Works program for Public Works. And you'll see the very top line is that if we are to achieve our county levy target of 2.5%, we will have a county levy that comes in 2023 at $52,893,896. In order to achieve that, we would have to find cost savings that equal $3,062,000. So all of those departments who have reported all week long all of the service level reductions that we have to make to achieve the council target of 2.5%, the total of that is $3 million. And if we can achieve those savings or reductions, we will hit our council levy target of 2.5% at $52,893,000. Madam Chair, that would be the end of my summary.
Thank you. So we'll just go back quickly. Anything on MPAC? The financial expense category. And the revenues. Member from Edmundston Bromley, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I wonder through you if Mr. Foss could speak to the budget enhancement revenue line. I haven't added them. Is that just meant to offset the various expenses that have been accrued across the entire department?
So the column to the left, and I guess, Daniel, if you go up a little wee bit, are you talking about the costs in total? So at the bottom of the expense category, we have budget enhancements of $1,224,253. So the enhancements that have been presented not just to this committee, but to every committee this week would total $1,224,000. Oh, sorry. My apologies. I'm working with an updated budget after all of the committees took place this week.
I think he was looking at the 511s.
Right.
Yes. Nobody knew where you were, what road you were going down there, Jeff.
No,
And
well,
if I may, for clarity, like perhaps as unrelated to the expenses, I was just venturing that as a possibility. I'm questioning what is the source of the enhanced revenue of $511,852.
yeah, the $511,000 in county revenue would be the additional revenue that we would need to offset all of the budget enhancements that were presented to this committee as well as to all other committees earlier this week. The number that I mentioned was an updated number because I'm working off the live budget document, and so we had a number of recommendations that took place at other committees which are growing this budget enhancement from the 500,000, and we're now well in excess of $1 million of budget enhancements that are being forwarded by committees to the budget workshop next week. Sorry for the confusion, Madam Chair, but I'm working off the live document, which has already been updated. It's the one that's going out tomorrow, but the package that came forward to committees this week would have total enhancements of $511,000. In other words, we'd have to raise, in order to pay for those enhancements, another $500,000 of municipal levy to pay for the announcements that came forward to committees next week. I'm simply telling you that that number is now $1.2 million in enhancements that are being asked to be considered by council at next week's meeting.
And now it makes sense because of Health Committee. Sorry, I just wanted to make sure I still had quorum. Oh, okay, yep, I'm good. No, it's okay. The warden had to leave. He warned me, so I just wanted to make sure I didn't lose quorum. Supplementary member from Abbotston Bromley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So just to be clear then, if council were actually to adopt the baseline, then we would add, from the chart that we're looking at, disregarding the amendments that may have been generated through the week, but on what we're looking at, we would add the 511.8 to the 60,000, or rather 60 million as baseline, or add it to the 57 million as the 2.5%, correct?
Yes.
Yeah, the county levy, that's actually an excellent question. So the county levy last year, $50,540,000. Status quo, if we didn't do anything, is 55 million, but the reductions that we've presented in this committee and every committee total 3,062,000, which would bring us to our target levy of 52,893,896. So we would have to add 511,000 to that target of 52 to be able to finance all of the enhancements that's being recommended, but only after we made $3 million worth of cuts.
And again, member from Abbotston Bromley.
Thank you. And I do apologize. That was my mistake. If I used the term levy, that was unintentional. I was looking at the bottom line, the total revenues. So i.e. on the total revenues, whether it is the 60 million, 60.25 million, or 57.25 million, we would add to that enhancement to arrive at what the requirement is. As to where it would be assigned, we would have to find that value. Perhaps between now and budget workshop, there might actually be another grant opportunity. We need to find the revenue. It is not exclusively the jurisdiction or the domain of levy. We can find it in debt, reserves, or levy. Thank you.
Dare to dream, Councillor Donahue, dare to dream. Member from Deep River, please.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a question. I had a couple of things here. I guess around the county share tax write-offs, and I'm assuming there's some, I guess the question is, can we better estimate what those would be from information from lower tiers? Like, I'm not sure how much of a handle we have on what's coming at us, but I would think we might have an idea.
Go ahead.
Thank you for the question. So the roll that's available to us at the beginning of the year is the returned roll, which under the Municipal Act, we are required to calculate a tax rate based on the returned roll. Throughout the year of 2023, things will happen. And your local municipalities will be participating in and making decisions around tax write-offs. Typically, we don't participate in those discussions with local treasurers about the write-offs that are being discussed and approved at the local level unless they're significant. And I typically will be engaged with a local treasurer to let me know that there is a write-off coming and here is the impact on the county as well as the local municipality of that decision that's being taken by the local municipality. But if at this stage of the game, the best I think that we can do as far as a budget goes is to sort of take some bit of an average of what we've been experiencing over the last number of years. We've kind of maintained this budget of $300,000 in the last 5 years. It didn't work for 2 of the years, but the other 3 years we had sufficient resources to be able to finance our share of those local decisions about write-offs. But as far as having an early warning, if you will, or better information about what the write-offs are, the only time that happens is when we have significant large write-offs for single, usually commercial or industrial property owners, that the treasurers make me aware of it so that we can prepare for it at year end.
Yes, supplementary member from Deep River.
Yeah, so on the flip side, if you could rotate your crystal ball around, same question on supplementary taxes. Like, is there any mechanism for us to know that there may be some supplementary coming at some point during the year?
Madam Chair, the supplementary roll is available only in October or November. I think it's released, the supplementary tax summaries, so it's 9 or 10 months into the year by the time we get that information, yeah.
All right, anything further? And before we go into close, we are going to take a break because I can see people are fidgeting and could probably use a walkabout for a couple of minutes. If that's okay with you. Perfect. Okay. Oh, I'm sorry. Member from Admiston Bromley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I wonder if, through you, if Mr. Foss could just provide what is the assessment that is currently the multiplier of both the real growth plus the levy increase, i.e. what is the assessment that we're multiplying our tax rate on?
Madam Chair, until we have an approved budget, I can't do much with that, but the target of the county levy is 2.5%. We do know that weighted growth is 2.16%, so in total, 4.66% is what we are estimating. If we get to that column, which is our target budget column, 2.5%, it would be weighted growth of 2.16, as well as a levy target of 2.5, in total 4.66% in total levy dollar change from 22 to 23. Again, that assumes that we make budget reductions totaling $3 million, and we do not include budget enhancements. So lots of decisions still to be made, but the one thing we can count on is weighted growth of 2.16%. That's a firm number, and that comes from our updated 2022 year-end assessment roll.
Supplementary member from Admiston Bromley.
So predicated on, and certainly I understand on the levy, that is simply last year's levy multiplied by the percentage rate, and then it's applied afterwards. But if we know that real growth is 2.16, then we had to have known what the actual assessment was that is growing it by 2.16%, would we not?
That's correct. In December of each year, every treasurer receives a returned roll from MPACT, and I have that roll essentially because there's no reassessment that's taking place. Traditionally, when MPACT is moving forward with their current value assessment, we have to separate that assessment, that return roll, into reassessment impact and growth impact. There is no reassessment impact, so when that return roll comes in, all of it is weighted growth, and so that return roll is increased by 2.16% on a weighted basis, and that's all CVA growth. So that number we have.
Yes, member from Edmonton
So
Bromley.
just to finish up, then I wonder if Mr. Foss can just provide that number. So what is the assessment that is, we had to have known what it was to have grown it by 2.16%, so what would it be now? What is the total assessment?
Yeah, it's $13,282,902,119. That also includes the properties that are exempt.
Thank you. That was the number I was looking for.
All right, anything further? Excellent. Let's take 5, guys, because we do have to go into closed. Tina, if you could count us out, please. Thank you. Welcome back, everyone. And now I'm going to ask for a motion to move into closed for an identifiable individual. Moved by member from North Algona Wilberforce, seconded by the member from Laurentian Hills. All in favor? And we are now in closed. Welcome back, everyone. We are in open. I will ask for anything else on number 8, the departmental budget. Member from Admiston Bromley? No.
Yeah, it was related to the business cases, Madam Chair, and I think so in the interim I have pulled it up, and I think the error is mine. I think that what is contained within the business cases is the total cost of this, not necessarily simply the remuneration. Is that accurate? Okay. Okay, thank you.
Excellent. With that, I do have a mover and seconder for number 8, the departmental budget. If there's nothing further, I will call for the vote. All in favor?
I wonder if you might repeat the resolution?
That the Finance and Administration Committee recommend that the draft budget for all divisions reporting to this committee be forwarded to the February 22nd, 2023 County Council Budget Workshop for approval.
Thank you.
And it's already been moved and seconded. All in favor? And I will ask for a motion to accept the report as a whole. Moved by the member from North Laguna Wilberforce, seconded by the member from Killaloe, Haggerty, and Richards. Anything further? Yes, member from Admiston Bromley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I note that Mr. Foss advised that I think tomorrow is the anticipation of disseminating the information for budget workshop next week, and I'm not specifically, certainly I will leave it open to any of the other members. Is it possible to actually get a copy of the consolidated budget in a Excel format? I wasn't seeking a vibe, Madam Chair.
Oh, okay. There's some ruminating going on over here.
Through you, Chair. It's a big document with formulas and different years and notes on it. It will take some work. Are you looking for it to come out at the same time?
My intent would not be necessarily that this has to be disseminated tomorrow. However, so I will advise that it has taken me a lot of time to actually convert it to Excel format from the PDF. I have been doing that for a number of years. It probably takes me something on the order of 2 to 3 hours to reformat when I've done that. It seems to me like that it could probably be saved in a which is what I typically do, save it into a format that you can remove any of the side notes, etc. Ultimately, the PDF is saved from the precise file. This begins as an Excel spreadsheet. It is simply saved as a PDF to distribute to council. I can't imagine that it takes as much time to remove any data that may not be relevant to this, as opposed to me taking half a day to actually do it.
Through you, Chair, ultimately, if there is a direction by motion to do so, we will abide by that with revisions to it to make sure we remove items that are of our working nature, I guess, if you would like to call it that, and move it from there.
I'll wait the chairs.
It would be very difficult because of the formulas. And I'm surprised that you could do it, Councillor Donahue, because I tried to do it one year and it just gave me circular references. It wouldn't even allow the formulas to convert.
Yeah, I'm just confirming that's what I thought. As a worksheet, it would be fine. It's the integration with the other. We'd have to send you everything else. Well, yeah, without formulas, it'd be fine. But the formulas will be to other sheets in other documents or other files throughout the finance division. Of course, as you can imagine, they deal with several spreadsheets.
All right, thank you. The answer then is
no.
no.
Well, the answer is yes, but The answer could be, would you like an Excel document without the formula specific to the links to the document? We can do that.
Well, I'm not looking for the particular formulas. When I convert from the PDF version, it actually doesn't have, it just has the numbers. So something that was formatted in the Excel spreadsheet that is simply a formula in the cell, ultimately it reflects a number. When the PDF is printed, the number is printed. When I convert it into Excel, it's just the number now. It doesn't have the formula. That's what the formulas mean little to me where it's appropriate if I want to do an auto sum or things like that. What I'm challenged in seeing this, and I can do it, but it is inordinately difficult if I'm trying to do something across, so now I have to scroll through 25 pages with my calculator open and take the data from that page. Whereas, with a click, I can say sum these columns, which is a substantial challenge. I don't know what this may not be of any benefit to any other member of council. I do not know. I was not seeking to the level that this be part of the package. I was making a request to see if that was possible.
Chair, and to the councillor member, yes, we can do that, albeit without the formulas attached to different worksheets.
Fair enough, and what I will advise too is when I have done this in other instances, it will show up and say these numbers get updated from another spreadsheet, but because it doesn't have access to that other spreadsheet, it doesn't update, and that's fine. Ultimately, what is going to be printed into a PDF version or published as a PDF version tomorrow will be the final draft to be presented. After that, it doesn't matter what the formulas are. We'll be debating that next week.
Chair, just for one member of clarification, I'm sure that will help out Mr. Foss and Mr. Burke. On our budget, you'll see a number of years that it goes back to. The rest are hidden. How many years would you like inclusion? What you see here today back to 2018 on this budget, I think, or 2019. Would you like back to that 2019 level, or would you?
I mean, that's satisfactory. Yeah. Anything after that, I've already converted prior years, so I can do a data dump from my own spreadsheets on that one. Just for clarity, though, too, so where there is a formula now, will that convert to a number, i.e. it's not going to be a vacant cell because I don't have access to those other spreadsheets that are links, correct?
Madam Chair, in order to send it out, we would have to remove all the formulas. So essentially, you're going to have numbers in Excel, in rows, in columns, but there'll be no formulas behind any of the numbers. So it will show as numbers.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, all I got were error messages because I didn't have access to those other spreadsheets. The nice thing about in Excel, you can hide, and I would do this, I would hide 20, 21, and 22 and use 19 as the reference, just because we've had such weird years. But anyway, yeah, that would be wonderful if that can be done.
And just for clarity, that would be because I know Mr. Foss identified that he has already updated in the spreadsheet some of the amendments that have already been changed. So it would be the finished document that will be the spreadsheet or the Excel version of the PDF. That is what I'm seeking. Thank you.
Excellent, thank you. Anything further on the Corporate Services Department report? Then I will call for the vote. All in favor? Excellent. Is there any new business? I see none. We've already had our closed meeting. I know that this says our next meeting is Thursday, March 9th. It is now Monday, March 20th. And I will call for an adjournment, please. Moved by the member from North Elgin-Wilberforce, seconded by the member from Laurentian Hills. All in favor? We are adjourned.